and my focus in market research was qualitative research. Conducted a lot of focus groups with Black people all across the country. We tend to live in major markets and in the South, and I was traveling all over doing that. With the dismantling of DEI, it's less of that. That's why it's very special to be here and to have the conversation and to have you all attend this conference and in particularly attend this session. As we, diversity, equity, and inclusion is still important. We still have to understand how to engage with people who are different from us. So taking it away is not going to stop. Just let me say that. So, all right. So I just want to bring back the leadership blind spots, which are also insights for connection with Black people, avoidance of America's unbridled history, privilege and the deficit of empathy. This is what we're going to talk about today, number 2. And the rest of them we talked, I shared this earlier, understanding Black language. These are so important for engagement with the Black community, and again, understanding other communities as well. And before we get into privilege and the deficit of empathy, I think it's important to talk about equality and how every generation in the Black community has been fighting for equality. I am a baby boomer, as my parents were, and so it was a big deal. Civil rights was a big deal for us. I was born and raised, I'm from Chicago, born and raised in Chicago, lived in the segregated South for 5 years as a little kid. So it was a culture shock moving from Chicago to Albany, Georgia. My father got he was a classical music professor and piano. And so he was a professor at Albany State College. It's Albany State University now. So we moved the family to Georgia, and it was culture shock seeing the coloreds not allowed, because we were colored then, whites only signs everywhere. So that was my exposure to understanding civil rights and fighting for equality back during that time. And so then we moved to millennials, who I remember when the millennials did. We don't want to talk about history. We didn't live that. That's not us. Don't want to hear it. Get away. And then Trayvon Martin's murder happened, and it was the Zimmerman's verdict where they had a wake-up call. And then we started seeing MoveOn.org and the color of change, and we started, hearing more and more from these younger people fighting for equality. And then, of course, there was George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, but it hasn't changed. This whole notion of equality hasn't changed. And so, for years and years, this company called Iconoclast did a study on values. And they asked people 99 values, Black, African American, Asian, Hispanic, and white. They asked them to rank their values. And Iconoclast was bought by Ganter Research, and I still think they're doing the study. They don't want market research people to have access to the study. I don't get that, but anyway. So for years and years, we saw how the number one value, even though the top 10 was pretty much the same for white, Blacks, and African Americans and Asians, but the hierarchy in those top 10 was different. The hierarchy was different. So the number one value for Black Americans was equality. The number one value for whites was loyalty. And we see that today. It's really playing out today as we see more with this current administration how important loyalty is for that administration and a lot of their followers who are not necessarily Black. We still see that. And so when we look at how equality plays out, the Crown Act is an example of how equality might play out. So Crown Act is legislation that was led by Dove and the Urban League to make sure that people are not discriminated against based on their hair texture. I mean, a few years ago, I could not stand before you with this hair texture in my hair, so they got the Crown Act, and I think it was approved in 23 states. So I have 27 states to go. So that's an example. And then we see that Black people, all of these hashtags that they use in social media. And this is all about wanting to be a part of mainstream, but wanting to still maintain their own culture. It's about equality. Black excellence, Black Lives Matter, Black women, Black men, take a knee, stay woke. Remember we had the conversation about woke, don't forget that, being an apostle. So these are all the hashtags that have been used to talk about, to celebrate our culture and to celebrate equality, or the need for equality. And I love Beyonce's quote. It has been said that when we protest racism, some assume that we are protesting America. We saw that when Colin Kaepernick took a knee. He wanted equality, justice. It wasn't anti-Black, anti-white, anti-flag. It wasn't that. So we're still seeing this equality, this equality paradigm. So we wanted to talk about that because it kind of leads into the next insight: privilege and the deficit of empathy. So privilege affords special rights, advantages, or immunities for particular groups of people. It's not an accusation, but it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. And it's not about blame, because people feel when you talk about, and it does feel like blame, it does feel punitive, but it's about gaining an awareness. And privilege can create barriers, though, to empathy, to understanding how to walk in another person's shoes. I don't need to do that. They're this, they're that. People have their own ideas. So it creates blind spots for these individuals, particularly against marginalized community, and makes it harder for people to empathize. So I want you to think about the space, I need to get my phone, the space where you are, where you've always been in. Remember the time. I want you to think about the space where you've always been welcome. You've always been welcome, you've always been included, and what made you feel that way. And then I want you to consider how you might feel excluded in that safe space and what factors contribute to that. So I'd like for you to just to take a couple of minutes and talk to your table peers about it, and then we'll report back. The space where you've always been welcome and included, what made you feel that way, and how you might feel excluded in that same space. What does that look like and what does that feel like? So let's just chat about that just for a couple of minutes. Where you feel included in a space and excluded in the same space. How does that feel?
Sure. I feel like I'm gonna start talking about something.
Similar, right? Like, you understand the culture, you want to challenge, and then I just feel that thing, like someone's kind of not talking, but like here's your kid, right? Like if I don't have no knowledge of it yet, there's like someone who's not doing it once, but also like
I'm proud of people like people who are so people interesting now. We are most people are really comfortable having people, but one the welcome is like the now you're just like you make a lot of decisions about me. Wait,
Okay, people.
that's what I would say. I think not like if it belongs, but
Okay, let's wrap up our conversation. Let's see how we did. I think
we have like 2 more minutes. We only got 2 people.
no worries. No worries.
So I actually kind of outsourced to other groups before I'm like, well, you know, it's like,
Yes, that's what,
dramatic kids, but like they like actually had your experiences. I also like grew up like other different environments and kind of we went to pretty good schools on kind of
the necessary, yeah. 100%.
Okay, I gave you 2 extra more minutes. I'm sorry. Here, I would like to hear, who would like to share first their responses to these 2 questions? What table? You want to go first? We're still talking. So, what about this table?
So I kind of said that in my previous school district,
Yes.
I was one of the only black leaders.
Yes.
No, I shouldn't say that.
Tell me
One of
about
the few.
it.
Oh, Chris.
And what district are you in?
I currently work in Madera Unified. I used to work at Close.
Okay.
And so the Close Unified is predominantly white. And so I was one of few black leaders. And so it's one of those cases where like I worked hard and built some good relationships, so I was sitting at the table and it was fine, but at the same time, as much as I felt welcome and included, it also was a space where I knew what it felt like to not feel welcome and included, just because when I walked into a room, I didn't see anybody else in the room.
Act like you, yeah. That's one of the things a lot of companies, I did a lot of work for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, one of my favorite clients, because they were a Tell Me client. And their job was to make sure that their audience was to be more diverse. And when we talked about, to your point, how black people walk into the symphony, any place, we're always looking for ourselves. I think any other culture, if you're Asian, you're looking for yourself. If you're Latino, you're looking for yourself. And so they didn't understand that, because we were looking for ourselves in the audience, and we're looking for ourselves on the stage with the performers, so that representation matters. So you feel welcome because they say come, but when you don't see yourself, it becomes questionable. Where's the rest of us? So good point. Thank you so much, Chris. What about feeling excluded in the same space? What do you think factors contribute to that? Who'd like to share? What table? That question. Where you felt welcome, and then what make you feel excluded? Anybody?
We didn't talk about it at this table, but I talk about it a lot. So we're coming from Salinas, California, which is predominantly a Latino community, but we've really been focusing on our Black students the last 3 years because our data has told us that we need to provide more focus for our Black students, and I happen to be the parent of Black children. But I went 2 years ago, I took a group of students to a Black youth leadership retreat. So we partnered with an organization out of Sacramento. We brought a group of students to the Black youth leadership retreat up near Yosemite. And for the first time in my privileged life, I was the only white person in a Black space, like a fully Black space. Wow. And I, realized instantly that as much as I thought I felt very comfortable in Black spaces, when everybody who looked like me was taken away, all of a sudden I didn't know how to navigate where I was. And my students, who I have really great relationships with, felt it for me, and they were like, we got you. They were there to kind of be like, you're gonna be okay, And in our cabin at night, as everybody got ready for bed and girls were putting on their bonnets and getting prepared, and I was kind of like this is a space that so many of us need to be in, because even though I'm accessing the community often not in that way, and so
so what was the learning for you?
Well, it was interesting because there was a situation that happened and I couldn't figure out if I should step in. I have this leadership role in my school district, in my families, and I was like, is this a space where I say something? I was looking around, and the community guided me. Literally the leader of the Black Youth Leadership Retreat said, Summer, come here. Let's talk about these pieces that were there. But it made me really realize how much just having a connection to somebody who I could be we have a shared experience, how meaningful that was, and how often, because our Black student population is so small, in a district of 3,100, we have 14 Black students, how often they don't get that. How in most spaces, they don't have anybody to look to that reflects that. And
so it helped you develop empathy and understanding
for
and
sure.
Insight for the other side.
It made me realize that I thought I had that, but I didn't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I thought I had it.
Exactly. One more, anybody else wants to share either point? Anybody else want to share something different? You guys had a vigorous conversation going on back there. What was happening?
Well, most of our table, we all work together. It just happened to go that way. But we're actually from Parsec. So what we shared was that working at Parsec has been very welcoming. We all have a very diverse background in regards to the members that we have at our organization. But not only that, everybody that is there does care very deeply, and it's really nice to come to a space where I haven't worked like that or been in an organization that has felt that way.
Yes.
Coming from a very toxic workplace, coming to this, it's very eye-opening and kind of sad that it took this long for me to reach somewhere where it's been like that.
Absolutely. Okay, all right, let's go to the next question. Empathy helps people understand others' challenges. Walking in another person's shoes. It can improve relationships across all groups, creates more inclusive workspaces, like the young lady mentioned there about Parsec. It can inspire actionable change and foster an environment of understanding and support. So, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit. Your comfort zone, I think you mentioned that. We're gonna skip this exercise. We're gonna go to the next one. So what I wanna do is show you a video. It's Procter & Gamble has done a wonderful job of creating videos that shows the full experience of Black life. It's great conversation starters, and it helps people think differently about Black people. So we're gonna play this video and then we're gonna have a little discussion about it, and then I'm gonna have you discuss a question that I have. And start it over.
Yeah.
And we need a little sound. Can you guys see?
If you think you know what happens next.
Can you pause it? Can you switch it to HDMI? Sorry, it's playing in our breakout room.
I just wanted to share with you.
Try the Epson. Yes. Can you make it louder on your volume? Your volume's down.
To understanding. These are the black stories we've been shown.
Yeah, I can start it over. Sorry about that, guys.
If you think you know what happens next, ask yourself why. These are the black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. The full picture of black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
They have a number of these videos. I particularly really like that one. Sometimes I close my presentation with it, but I'd like to talk about it a little bit and what you saw. So, were there any moments in the video that stood out for anybody that was impactful? And did you have the same assumptions like, oh, this is not gonna go well?
Yes.
When you saw the video, anyone?
Well, I knew that that's what they were setting up, was all the negative scenarios that we thought were coming, especially for me, for the mom and babies, because I've been in those scenarios where I know people are looking at me, look at this lady with 3 kids or like that. You don't know, my husband's about to come pick us up.
Right.
But you could tell how they're looking, and so I kind of, because I've been in those experiences, I kind of knew the kids are just fine, so like they're not, but I'm me, I've been in my skin, my family has been in those skins, and been in those situations and had those assumptions thrust on us. So that's what just jumped up to me, so I've been there, and I know what they're probably thinking, and
Anyone else have anything to add about the video? Any emotions or thoughts about the video?
Yeah, I think anxiety you do see for me, like I feel like watching that, even similarly, like the same lens, I know it's posed to kind of surprise you, but I think that, yeah, just anxiety.
Okay.
And I think it's the way that commercials pose to build the suspense, but also I can resonate with a lot of experiences.
And did your perspective shift at the end too? Did you feel when you were watching the video, did it come across as, oh, these kids are probably gonna rob the store, or here's this woman, pregnant woman with no husband, no support on these kids? Did you think that as well? And it's not a trick question, and no judgment, guys, because I felt the same way. I felt the same way, yes.
I think that something I thought about when I saw the kids at the end, like buying a drink for his friend and smiling and giving the guy money, is like, those are the kids that I know.
Yes.
Where I think, like, depending on your perspective, things are framed a certain way. But like I'm like reflecting on even particular students, right? That I'm like, oh, those are the kids that I know, right? And like the smiles on their faces and wanting to get their friend a drink. So that's just something that I like landed for me.
Alright.
I was just thinking also about how many people might turn that commercial off before the second part got there.
There you
Like
go.
that was my, like, I was like, oh, like, yes, they get there, but like what about the people who never see the other side and they see the part that fulfills their already present bias? And again, like I shared, especially like with the boys, just because I am the parent of a black male, like I worry about him all the time in situations like that. Again, reflection in ways that I can never understand. So I just, like, as I watched it, I thought like, oh, like I could see, you know, so-and-so turning off the commercial and not seeing the end of that, and that's worrisome.
So the question then becomes, for discussion at your table, how can we challenge ourselves to widen our lens in our schools or with our students or curricular policies, or if you want to attack all three, to, you know, talk about that for a couple of minutes. How do we widen our perspectives? How do we not limit our perspectives? I mean, we all come to the table with biases, we all do. What do we do? How do we challenge ourselves or our peers? So talk about that for a couple of minutes, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
That's all like kind of like a snapshot or back like the picture, like how many stories
He gave us sense of picture. And so you said like starting from
I want you to
Okay, alrighty. I think, okay, people, I know I'm asking these questions that require a lot of thought, and a lot of us are storytellers. This is kind of interesting because you need to have time to tell your story and your side. But let's just hear from a couple of you on this question. The importance of having a broader sense of culture and different cultures, and we all bring our biases to the table, but what do you do to challenge yourself? I think you were speaking, sharing a story. Do you want to share and start?
I just share a little bit.
And tell me your name.
My name is Aranko. I'm a faculty member at Fresno State. Because I work with a teacher, and many teachers, they feel like they are afraid to start the conversation about this because they don't really know much about it. So, and also in the other side, when the student of color, when they are called out to share their insight, it also gives a lot of pressure on them to be the representative of those people. So we talked about like having those kind of resources to share, and also bring all the different perspectives from different people to start the conversation can be a great way to start. And yeah.
Very good.
We had a lot of conversations.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yes, your name?
Melissa. At our table, we talked about actually, like, it's so easy. So solving this problem is so easy. You just have to get to know the kids that are in front of you. You just have to have a personal one-on-one relationship, get to know them, and everything that they are bringing to the table. And it's so easy to do when you just talk to kids and get to know them. But how do we do it in our schools? And this is something that she brought up, is like, we have to make time and space for that, and not slam the standards and slam the testing and slam all that down everybody's throats. It's like,
Right.
no, the most important thing is that we know our kids, we get them to come to school, we get them to show up because they know that we care about them, and then we can do some cool things with them.
I love that. So the bottom line is to know your kids. And to make time. She says easy. I'm like, I'm not even in the industry. And I'm like, I don't know.
Maybe I can
I don't know.
complicate that a little bit.
Okay. Yes. Go ahead.
So when I think, and I think I had a great opportunity to ask my table friends here about their recent experience in high school and what kind of curriculum and stories they were exposed to. But I think at the larger level, here in the great state of California, where we've been gearing up to implement ethnic studies as a requirement in high schools statewide. It's supposed to be a graduation requirement starting next year.
It'll probably.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. There's talk about it in the governor's budget that now all of a sudden it's this unfunded mandate, and really we're gonna waffle on this now. We've been gearing up for it, and it's just it's so hard. It was the same thing with the math instructional framework. There was so much equity built into that. It took us 2 years to get that approved because people are afraid. People are afraid to hear the stories. Yeah.
All right, I just wanna say one thing, I have to go back to the easy real quick. I just need to say, again, I think it's the most complex thing we do. And
The most complex thing to do in terms of getting to know your kids? Or challenging yourself
these
to
pieces. Again, I'll go as a parent, and I shared at my table during that time, I've raised my kids, I know them better than anybody in this world, and I fail at this all the time when it comes to them. I dismiss things they've said to me because my world did not include it. I didn't understand the impact because my world didn't include it. I needed other people to constantly be calling me out on those pieces around me to say you are dismissing them. You are not taking this at the seriousness that it needs to because it wasn't part of my world. And with my students, it's the same way. I love them, I get to know them, I can tell you about them, but it's so much bigger than that, and it requires me to have a team that's constantly, we've brought in outside organizations that are having really hard conversations with us. They're telling us when we're not doing it right because it is a world in which we don't have all the insight into. So I can know them, but I can never know them at the level that's needed for it to be that easy.
I liked what you just said. Well, it's unfortunate when you said the word dismissing, but I think it's good conversation because I think what happens when we think about privilege and empathy, active listening is important. Listening does not mean agreeing.
Yeah.
It does not mean agreeing. And I got into this big conversation with my bestie in politics, and she didn't want a Trump supporter to come to her house. And I was like, well, we gotta, I said, it'll be interesting to hear the why behind the story, understanding the why. She didn't want to. I think she felt like if she listened, she was in agreement. And I think that's huge. When you said, I just dismiss them, I think that's one of the things that we talk about. So when you talk about what's easy, is active listening difficult? We could do it. We may have to know it I know I have to sometimes. And say, go ahead. So that's something that we can learn here that could be easy. I love what you're saying. The idea is easy to get to, getting to know the students.
Yes. And
practice active listening to them and not taking notes, not being on your phone, not being dismissive. I think that's extremely, extremely helpful. Let's go to the next thing. I want to talk a little bit about empathy. I love these quotes from Gloria Steinem and Cornel West. Empathy is the basis of any social movement. That makes sense. Again, wanting to understand the other person's side and how that's the beginning, like having, oh my God, you couldn't vote, you couldn't, just so many things you could. My parents couldn't vote in my lifetime when we lived in the South. And Cornel West asked, how are the least of these doing? The kids that are failing, the kids that are not doing well. We've heard stories over and over about that and how teachers made a little tweak or maybe it was a big tweak, or they found something easy to do. I love the word ease and easy. It's so important. People think love is the word. It's ease and easy. How do we make things easier, easy? And it's just having the courage to step up to the plate and ask the questions and to do, and it becomes easy. But asking about those students that aren't doing well, noticing, I love the young lady at the table here mentioned you in the red sweater, you're the young lady.
Oh, I haven't been young in so long.
Yeah, I'm identifying with you, okay? To a certain age. So I mean, because you talked about, you know, and we've heard this over and over again, kids who are the only black kid or the only white kid or the only, you know, how are the least of these doing? And asking ourselves that, and how, you know, making a connection from that there. So when empathy is absent, when we're not taking the time to understand how others feel, to walk in their shoes, so education then suffers too, and students suffer when we don't take the time to do that. And it's a lot on teachers. It's a lot. It's a lot on educators. It's a lot on the administrator. I know it's a lot. It's like one more thing to do, but at least to put these ideas in your spirit so they're there, so maybe there's an opportunity for you to take action. So I don't know if we're gonna have time to do that, to do this, but these are 4 viewpoints from a student's lens. You know, how do we understand what the student sees? A lack of representation. I'm the only one, or we're the only ones. There's 3 of us in this whole school of hundreds of kids. How are we treated differently? What is a student here? There's still the stereotypes. I love the video and the discussion yesterday about the N-word, having different experiences. Little kids do come in kindergarten, they don't see color, and as they get older, I know my girlfriend's kids, they started questioning their hair. Why is your hair like that? How come you're dark? Right? You know, it's over and over again. So then the stereotypes and the questions and different expectations come from other students and the teachers. You know, what the student thinks and feels. I mean, is there you know, self-doubt and frustration. At the same time, we've had to be resilient. I talked about that with Black people. We've had to be resourceful, and we've had to be resilient to sustain all of these years and all of the things that we've gone through. And then what the student says and what they do, code switching. I still wanted to talk to Dr. J about code switching. When we talk about code switching in the Black community, and even from a marketing perspective, it is to help others feel more comfortable with us. So I code switch. I don't necessarily talk the same way that I do, and it causes us, as we say, we have to be on all the time when we're with people who are not like us, when people don't respect the Black language, the way we talk and what we do. So there is disengagement. Sometimes there's students excel despite these obstacles. So I wanted us to maybe tackle, and maybe we, you know what, maybe we do need those. I don't know if we need those handouts.
I've got them if you want them.
Only so that people can see what, you know, they can see this and have it in front of you. So what I want you to do for this last exercise is maybe not take both questions, but one, or maybe the first one. How can student voices help educators and administrators become more aware of the realities? So, that's nice. So how do we help people become more aware of these realities of the students? What is it that you think we need to do? How can the student voices help these educators? And if you have any you have any additional ideas of how we could widen the lens, that'll be great. But let's just take one of those questions and look at these experiences from the student's lens and think about what can we do? What are some next steps that we can do like right now? What can we do tomorrow? What can we do to kind of facilitate growth and positive outcome for students that have these experiences? What do you think we need to do? How do we move empathy along? How do we walk in their shoes? What do you think we should, maybe it's think about, maybe it's listening more. What do we need to do? How do we get input into the curriculum that can meet these needs or align with these needs so that students have a better outcome? It's thinking about, those kinds of things. Something very simple that you can do like tomorrow or right now. What do you think you could do? Whatever it is you can do, what might that look like? Everyone else but that doesn't mean anything that I can't sell it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Someone else that maybe, and she and they come in and just like, what you guys working on? You know, like they get very, yeah, no, exactly.
girl about planning. There are
Alrighty, lots of vigorous conversations going on, lots of recommendations. I've had a chance to sit in the table with a couple of people. So before we close, I'd like to hear what we could do right now or tomorrow. Or, from my administrators back there, they talked about being validated, and I took some notes too that I thought was really, really good. So, how do we address these needs, this perspective from the students? What can we do tomorrow or right now? Yes.
Something I heard at my table from both Christian and Liz, they both have the power within their own positions to ensure that the actual course materials are representative of diverse backgrounds. So Christian, he was talking about, he does iReady curriculum development, and making sure like things from the math problems to the STEM problems have like stories that are from different cultures, and then also making a specific, a California specific curriculum, because we have a whole different culture out here. And so I thought that was really cool. And then Liz was talking about ordering books for the schools that she works with, and making sure before they're ordered that there's diverse people in them. And she had a specific example of like kindergarten books, and like how they usually only have animals or white people in them. And I thought that was like so profound, because with my baby, like the books I've been getting for her, like they have these books now where it's not like cartoons and stuff, like there's real people there and they're all diverse and they're smiling, but you know, it's 2024 and she's like 4 months, and this is my first time seeing those things. I don't remember seeing that ever in my education.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I just thought that was really cool on our
Excellent.
table.
Excellent, excellent. What about this table? Thank you.
We talked about hiring practices, you know, how do we make sure that our staff represent our students? You know, obviously a long-term, something we would work on, but we just talked about listening to students, empathy interviews, listening circles, but also with.
Are you doing that now?
I have done that. I don't have a student group to do that with now, but I have done that in the
Sure.
past.
I like that, listening circles.
Yeah, and I think the key with that though is listening, but also demonstrating that you're doing something with the listening, like taking that information and then using it to form that change idea. But that listening has to happen first from their perspective, not just what you think is the answer. Listening from the
Excellent,
students.
excellent, great. What about this table? You guys had a great conversation. Would you like to share?
Oh, okay, well, I was just saying that I'm a retired teacher, taught kindergarten and first grade.
Kindergarten and first grade, Lord. I love those teachers.
And I was just saying that I taught at a mostly Hispanic church school, and I too taught Hispanic. And anyway, I found that starting the school year to create the kind of atmosphere that I needed, because especially in kinder, this is their first school experience. So they're very nervous. They don't know me. I'm just this authority figure. But anyway, what I tried to do is when we would have a talk about a science lesson, the sun and the moon and all that kind of thing. Whenever somebody was willing to answer a question or add something, I would try to make sure that I would say, that's great, Jose. I like the way you express that, or however. What happens though when you do that, especially with the little ones, they all turn then and look at that kid who just got a big thumbs up, and you should see the countenance on his face just change. And so now he feels so validated. That was a nice, good thing.
Validating responses, okay? So empathy interviews, listening circles, putting the action with what you're talking about, validating students' responses. What else can we do?
We talked mostly about adults and holding adults accountable. And a lot about, we've brought in a lot of resources, which with our students in mind, but what that's done is moved the responsibility further and further away from the people who are closest to the students every day, and it's allowed them to not be held accountable because somebody else is doing something. And so, yeah.
When you're talking about adults, are you talking about teachers? Are you talking about administrators?
Teachers, school staff, administrators, like just in general, like we have.
Teachers have a lot on them.
The challenge is that the problem continues when the teacher isn't the root of the solution. So if a student is being moved out of the classroom to receive the support they need, it reaffirms for a student that the classroom isn't a place where support is, right? So if you're going to the counselor for everything, or you're going to the Black Youth Leadership Group to get reaffirmed, if everything is outside of that space, there's nothing in that space that says, I belong here also. And so, yes, those supports are necessary and needed, and teachers have a lot, and that needs to be the space where students are affirmed in there, so.
Excellent. And our parsec table?
I mean, we have we have two former educators here, one he's an educator right now as well.
Yeah,
But their perspectives were really
we were just talking about how difficult it is sometimes. We sometimes put it on the teacher, but they're going through a lot of pressure, and especially when they're new.
Yes.
They come in, I'm telling you from an admin point of view, that they come in with a lot of energy and wanting to change things, but they're put right back in line as soon as it's mentioned that, okay, that you're on probation, you know, you can't really stir the pot, and that is the reality, and they are afraid of losing the job, and next thing you know, after 2 years, they're just following everybody else. So it's not as easy as, well, just, okay, teachers need to do this. Well, I mean, they have a job to protect. That's,
Sorry, I was gonna say, we had a bit of discourse here, because I had been coming from an educator since non-administrator, and my perspective and experiences from Teach for America, so I entered education, not originally planning to be in education, and so my complete slant was I'm coming in to disrupt, and I'm gonna be really forthright about that with my administrators, and I think that part of the conversation with Ruben and our table was, we're at a point in education where we need to count the costs. If we're not going to be risky and scrappy, because the status quo isn't working, frankly, we wouldn't be all here if it was.
I agree.
And so I think that even though job security is important, and I don't want to undermine that for our teachers, as a former educator, I think it is worth it because there's a life behind that data point, and if we don't do something, we're risking our students' lives and their future opportunities.
And
so,
that something is what?
Agree.
what do I mean specifically?
Yeah.
What do I mean specifically by doing things? I think part of the things we can do is by, some examples I presented are having a representation in the classroom. So I was a math teacher. One of the things I tried to do that I learned from other teachers was putting up representation of other mathematicians, black mathematicians. I didn't even know about all the black mathematicians that existed, and I was blown away. And it created conversations that further dismantled negative stereotypes, because my students were like, oh my gosh, who is that person?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is a black mathematician. They actually worked for NASA. They created Nerf guns, really fun stuff that students just didn't know, as I did not know. And I think that those are some practical and very low-hanging fruit. It didn't take me very long to do it. It took me 10 minutes, right? Students didn't need to know that, but it took me a little time to really create in them the opportunity that there's a possibility for me to go into STEM or to become a mathematician. So I think that those are some of the ways to kind of showcase opportunities for students, specifically representation in the classroom.
So representation does matter. Okay.
I think that there's this misconception also around right now, there's a buyer's and a seller's market in housing, right? And right now we're in a teacher market. There's a teacher shortage. Teachers are at a space where they can cause more disruption than ever because we need them. And I'm coming from long time as an educator and an administrator, but the other part is the updated California teaching standards are requiring them to do some of this work that we're putting forward. So right now it's gonna be a little bit of the opposite. If teachers aren't doing some of this work under the new standards for teaching, that's where there's gonna be repercussions. And I think that oftentimes we lean towards this fear of a job or position, but our teachers are highly protected by teachers unions. I've been active in those teachers unions, very protected by teachers union, and now have the backing of California teaching standards behind them to start to do some of this work. It was shared California is its own beast, right? We're really lucky in many ways to be here because we will get to continue to do some of that work, and now that there's another path for some of that disruption.
Thank you. All righty, so in closing, again, we think about privilege. We don't have to take it personally and beat ourselves up. It is an opportunity to be more introspective and not blaming being more aware of what the impact that privilege has on empathy. Are we creating opportunities or barriers? Again, empathy is that ability to walk in others' shoes. I think we need to think about making empathy our business, making it our business to understand those who are different from us, to do active listening, where it doesn't mean that we're in agreement. And that helped me so much to remember that to listen doesn't mean you're in agreement. Because like, I don't want to hear it. And not be dismissive. I think, we can learn a lot from it. And to challenge our own personal biases. Shaka said yesterday, addressing biases doesn't lower the bar. I love that. It raises the bar. It leads to better decisions. When we can talk about what we believe about others that may be correct or incorrect, and how it impacts us, how it prevents us from maybe going deeper, or having that representation, or thinking about ease and easy is important. I love that. Addressing biases doesn't lower the bar, it raises the bar. So I think that's something that we can do, when we leave here, is to be more open to that. So thank you, everyone, for